We all have IDs that we need to live our lives with, whether it be for getting a bank account or going to school or a license. So in the state of California, we'll take the license first because that's the easiest thing. They actually have a special form just for transgender people to change their gender identity, and if they've legally changed their name, to change their name. And it's actually has a special, it's the DL329. We have our own special form because we're special. And we take the form, we have it filled out by a medical doctor saying that this person is medically male or medically female, however they identify. And it used to be that you had to be on hormones before you could get this signed by a doctor. But now the doctor, by your presentation, by what you say, by how you're living your life, will sign the form, and you take it down to the DMV, and they will change your gender on your license for you. It's pretty painless, it's pretty simple. We rarely have any issues with the DMV, although it happens occasionally. And that's usually what most people will do first. So you have your license and you go about most of your business using your license as your ID. Most people will get a name change legally done through the court system, and anybody can change their name. So, you know, if Cecile decides tomorrow she'd rather be Donald Duck, she can go down to the courthouse and change her name. So that's sort of for everybody kind of a deal. In California, it's kind of actually a little expensive. It's about $340 for court costs. But if you have low income, you can actually get a fee waiver. If you're on Social Security, if you get some kind of county assistance, if you're a student, you can actually get a fee waiver where they waive all their court costs for you. And you just basically fill out the paperwork. You have to run it in the legal section of a newspaper for 4 weeks. That's to prevent against fraud. And then you go to court and the judge says, okay, yes, you've changed your name legally. If someone has had some surgery, and they have a letter from a doctor, the next thing they can do, and they can do it at the same time, is actually get a name and gender change through the courts. So it's a legal gender change. And the forms are almost exactly the same as the name change, except there's a portion that a doctor has to fill out and sign under, obviously, perjury, you know, I test this to be true, that says that this person has had irreversible surgical procedures to their body, and they are this gender. And you bring that with you to the court, and then the judge will assign you your legal gender. If you were born in the state of California, you can ask that they change your birth certificate through this court-ordered gender change. And you'll actually get a whole new birth certificate with your new name and your new gender on it. If you are have been born somewhere else, it probably won't do you much good, but it might help if you go to that other state and say, look, in the state of California, I legally had my gender changed, and it might help push them along to help change your gender. They just changed the law, so the people that were born in California but live somewhere else can apply to the California courts for their gender change and get their new birth certificate, even if they're not a resident of California at that moment. And that's brand new, so that's kind of cool. So they get the gender change. A lot of trans people have gone through a lot of hardship, a lot of people not supporting them, and usually by the time they get to this point, they don't have a whole lot of trust of any kind of government, anybody in authority. So the next part is really kind of scary for most people. I know when I went through it, it was really scary for me. So I had to change my name and gender on everything. Now, the older you are, the more things that you have. So we have to go through, you know, your bank, and you got to go down to your bank and show them your paperwork and change everything there. You've got to go every credit card you have, passport, everything like that. Now, the passport, I brought that up, that's brand new. They just changed it. The federal government changed the requirement for passport, where before a person had to have surgery and a letter from a surgeon that they had irreversible or had their SRS, irreversible gender change surgery. They just changed it so that surgery is not required. Because try to go to another country with a name of Susan and you look like Susan and your passport still has an M on it, I wouldn't leave the country. Things when you're younger too, school transcripts. You know, going back to college. Some colleges will change your forms at school, your graduation documents to your new name and gender. So if you have a long work history, and all the jobs that you had before, and you want to put out a resume, and they're going to call those old companies, then what are you going to do? So you either have to tell HR at the new place you're interviewing that I am trans and my old name was this and they knew me as male or female, which is really scary. And when you're interviewing for a job, you're like, will this lose me the job? Will it help? Will it hurt? Personally, what I did was I called 2 of my old jobs that I was on good terms with and the name of the person that I was going to put down on the application and said, here's what I've done. I've changed my name, I've changed my gender. Can you help me? When they call you, will you use he? Will you use my new name? And will you give me a recommendation? And I was lucky enough to have a couple people that did that for me. I had to go to a hospital and I changed my name and I went back to the same hospital and they went to pull my records and they were like, okay, this has a different name, same date of birth, same social security, what's the deal? So then every time you go through this, you've got to explain, okay, I'm transsexual and I'm F to M and that's my old birth, that's me. I've had a lot of people tell me that when they've gone for services, whatever they went there for becomes the secondary issue. And what happens is it becomes about you being trans. Sometimes good because they want to learn, sometimes not so good because they're not very nice about it. So, you know, the earlier someone transitions, the easier it is for them as far as those kind of ID issues go, which is really helpful. But we transition when we do, and you get through it. And sometimes it doesn't turn out so well, and sometimes it does, and you just kind of got to go with the flow. More employers are more open to trans people. They care about diversity in their workplace. HRC just added, you all know HRC, right, the Human Rights Campaign, and they have their list, 100 questions to get on their top 100 companies list. They've added just recently that if they don't provide transgender insurance, so that their insurance covers transgender, everything, hormone surgery, then they don't get the 100% score. And for trans people, wherever we go, we're still trans and there are issues we have to deal with. And especially when you're early on in your transition, maybe you don't look fully, you think presenting male or female enough. And so an example for me was I went to a Chargers football game. And anybody been to a Chargers football game, you know how many people and how crazy it is. And okay, my ID says male, and I've got to use the men's room. It's really scary to walk into a men's room in a public place and not sure that you're completely passable and worry that somebody is going to think you don't belong there. Somebody walks into a restroom because they need to use a restroom, you shouldn't do anything. You don't need to question them. You don't need to stare at them. You don't need to ask them, do you belong here? You don't need to be told, I think you're in the wrong restroom. You know, so I've known guys, and I've done it, is like, I will drive 200 extra miles to find a restroom that's a single door that I can lock, that's not a 2 or 3 stall place, that I don't have to worry, you know, because it's scary. I mean, I see people nodding, my guys out there, you know, it's really scary to be in a public place and have to worry about where everybody needs to use the bathroom. Why should we have to be scared about it? Why should we have to be worried about it? Last year at Long Beach State, we had a young trans man who just walked into the restroom. Somebody followed him in who had found out that he was trans, grabbed him, beat him up, and took a knife and wrote, carved on his chest, he carved it on his, that's one of our biggest issues, is our safety. And that's why people may not come out. That's why they might not identify as trans. They may not hang out with the trans groups or the people. Because it's really scary, and we hear about these stories and we read about these stories, and we don't want anybody else to be hurt. And you get to know that we're trans and we're not big and scary and we're not crazy and we're not going to do bad things to you. And once you become familiar with it, it's not so scary. And that's the goal of what we're trying to do in our trans community here in San Diego, and why I so appreciate you guys having me here, is that the more you can all get to know us and know that we're just regular old people just trying to live our lives as our authentic selves, the same as all of you.